Welcome to another episode of Dispersing the Cloud. This is week number 31, so episode 31. And I'm just going to give you a little recap of my week. So on Monday, I had an awesome brainstorming session with my buddy Casey. I told you guys last episode and last week that we were talking about possibly doing a once a month weekly video blog up in the Fresno area. So we're still kind of shooting some ideas back and forth of what that's going to look like, when that's going to take place, and how that's going to take place. But I'm really excited kind of getting that up and running within the next month. So when that starts happening, I will give you guys some more info on it. On Tuesday, we played for National Night Out up in Lodi. It wasn't on the tour, but it was just one of those dates where we got a call, see if we want to play. So we played a show up there with Awaken Worship, not necessarily part of the tour, but another chance to play. I had another sit-down meeting with my friend Shauna's husband, Rob. They're both my friends now. I've known Rob for a while now, too. And so we're working on a project that I told you guys a little bit about last week. And it has to do with Mickey's Grove, the museum in Lodi. So we've basically teamed up with them to provide a really cool field trips for some of these local schools. And we're actually looking for donors right now to donate to the museum to actually greenlight some of these projects that we have going on for the local schools. So if you guys are interested in that, hit me up in the comments below and I can tell you a little bit more about what we're doing. And then I had a great meeting with Elizabeth Shar. She's the other children's book author that I work with, and we're setting up for reads coming up. The school year's just around the corner for our little book tour that we got going on. So that's going on. And then I rehearsed all week for my buddy Chad's wedding. Him and his now wife Abby are married. And so we did that last night, and then I drove through the night and made it back to Sacramento in time to play for Liberty Towers this morning, and then I took a much-needed nap. So that was really my week, and then my perspective this week, or kind of my reflection time that I do, really had to do with the whole week. I was thinking about compound progress, and it was something that me and Elizabeth Shaw actually talked about in our meeting with. I have like 6 or 7 different projects going on right now with my wedding planning business and the production company and the acting and the singing and the children's books, and now this new podcast and this podcast and all these different things going on. And I was just telling her how overwhelmed I was. I was doing my best not to complain. I think we were just mutually talking about what our lives were going through right now and how we are productive and how we stay productive within our work weeks. And she gave me a reminder of compound progress. Compound progress is basically the concept of just doing very little things that keep moving the ball forward. I have a buddy, Jordan Mariello, who lives out in Orange County. He does this very well. And this is also, I want to say it's a Grant Cardone thing as well. He does little just baby steps, writing down little tiny goals for the week and then knocking those out. So the compound progress, I kept my focus on that last week, and I'm going to try to keep my focus on that this week as well. Book of the week for this week was The Wounded Healer, and I don't know who recommended this book to me, so I feel kind of bad for not giving that person a shout out. But this was given to me because you guys know I run a music ministry called #MoreThanRules, and I do music ministry. And part of the conflict with me doing music ministry is the mirror, right? You look in the mirror and you see imperfection, and I realize like how far away I am from perfection, right? From what Christ looked like. And this whole book talks about us being wounded. Every person is wounded in some way, shape, or form. And as a minister, or as I wouldn't call myself a minister, as someone who plays music or shares the message of Christ, right, in some fashion, making our wounds available for others to learn from is actually what we should be doing. And so I could be sharing my message from a place of this is how you should do it, but instead I should be sharing my wounds and sharing my heartaches and my troubles, because then people actually reflect to you. This was actually something really interesting that I first picked up this notion from Nick Lachey, of all people, from 98 Degrees. I was watching a documentary on him when I was very younger. I want to say it was like first couple years of college, and he had just broken up with Jessica Simpson, so they were doing this big story on him, and he came out with this new album. The album was phenomenal. And it was just a bunch of ballads and a bunch of stories about life and all that jazz. And they asked him, like your writing seems like it's getting better. Like, what's helping? And he said this statement, and it stuck with me my whole life. He said, I found out that the more honest with myself I was, the more true the music became. And I think that's a reflection of how we look at sharing any message, whether it be my message, the message of More Than Rules and the message of Christ, or just conveying an emotion or conveying a heartache. I think that we are not, as people, we are not homogenous. No man is an island, right? Everybody else is experiencing the same things. And so when you're honest with yourself and you share your wounds with people, people tend to respond to that because they can relate, they reflect on their own lives when they hear stories like that. This was a really cool story that came up next in the book. It was the story of, I just have in my notes to tell the story of the Bone and the Brothers. And it's a tale from ancient India. So there's these three brothers, and they all decide what they're going to do with their lives. So you say, let's go find out how to become successful in life. Let's go gain skills. So they leave, and they decide when they're going to come back, and they're going to meet. And they leave for years, and then they come back after X amount of years, and they say, so what have you learned? And one of the brothers says, well, I have learned that if I've learned this skill of, if I have the bone of an animal, all I need is the bone of the animal, and I can create all the rest of that skeleton frame from just one bone of the animal. And the second brother says, that's crazy. What I have is, if I just have the bones of an animal, a skeleton frame, I can create flesh. Like all the flesh that goes onto that skeletal frame, I can create that if I have the bones. And the third brother has said, well, what I have learned to do is, I've learned to give life to, as long as I have the bones and the flesh of an animal and they're all intact and everything's whole, I can give life. I've learned that skill. And so they set out together to go put their skill to practice, and so they find a bone, they pick it up. It's actually a bone of a lion, but they don't know it's a bone of a lion. So the first brother makes a skeleton, second brother adds flesh to it, and the third brother gives it life, and the lion jumps up and devours all the brothers. And then after it devours the brothers, it carries on into the jungle without a second thought of the brothers, right? Of the people who created him. And the reason that they tell that story, it speaks to people from seminary school, right? Who have gained all these skills, right? All these skills. I know all this Levitical stuff. I know all the Hebrew, the Greek. I know this and about Christ's lineage, and I know that slave, or I know that servant really means slave, and I know what the ecclesia is, and I probably said that word wrong, but I believe it's just a church, and I think that's the Greek word for it. But anyway, they have little nuggets like that, right? Just tons of them. I've just scratched the surface on that stuff, but they have all these tools and these skills. And then they literally end up destroying themselves and destroying other people with them, because their only task is to put those skills to work without thinking ahead of what will happen after that. The book then goes on to talk about two different types of people. You have a nuclear man and a pre-nuclear man. And it talks about these people who are pre-nuclear man has a hope for a beautiful, perfect future, right? This is your 1850s guy, right? There's just, the world is endless possibilities. The nuclear man, he has a kind of view of the future. The future might not even exist. There might not be a future. There might not be a tomorrow. No joke, we could get hit by a nuclear bomb right now, and not exist anymore. And so it's put people in today's world, it's put us in a very interesting mindset. That part of the book was kind of fascinating to listen to from that perspective of seeing two different types of thinking and why our perspective is so, I guess you could look at the world and just say it's outrageous right now with what people are doing. People are exploring their sexuality in different ways. There's even people who are claiming to be different ages than they are. I saw an article the other day, or watched a video the other day, of a man in Europe who he's like a 55-year-old man. He's pretending to be a 13-year-old girl who lives with a different family in Europe, and they're totally okay with it. And people are just checking out of their own realities. That's what it is. They're just checking out of reality because the future is just so like we don't know if it's even going to be there. And so it jumps into a little bit of like, why are we here? A little bit of purposeful living. This is the next quote that I pulled from it. Only when a man feels himself responsible for the future can he have hope or despair. The argument is that the nuclear man doesn't feel like he's in control anymore. He feels like the world is just, things just happen to you. You ever feel like things just happen to you and it's out of your control? Actually, this goes back to Grant Cardone. He's a very huge advocate for, no, I'm a control freak. I can control everything. This guy rear-ended me. I could have controlled that. I took the wrong street. I should have took a different street. It's my fault. Obviously, that's a crazy extreme, but we have to believe that we have some control in this universe to, one, pursue our purposes, right, and pursue our dreams, but to even have hope or despair. We have to feel like we have some control, because if we know we have no control and life is just a series of things that are already predetermined, right, regardless of if that's true or not, it's very hard to have hope. And it's very hard to have despair in that as well, because it's like, well, what will be, will be. This goes right to it. And when a man thinks of himself as a passive victim, his motivation falters, and he starts drifting from one moment to the next. So when you see yourself as a victim, and I'm sure I have friends like this, I'm sure you guys have friends like this, I've been guilty of this before, the woe is me. When I first started my college wrestling career, I was the victim guy. I was like, well, I'm not big enough to be a 125 pounder, so that's why I'm not good at wrestling anymore. And clearly by the end of college I figured it out, and I didn't get much bigger, so that wasn't the problem. But it was a victim mentality, and I just started floating through college and floating through my college career as a wrestler, not making any effort to get bigger, to lift, to get better at technique, because I was already good enough technique. I just wasn't big enough. And I've tried to lift a little bit. I can't get big. It's a woe is me. This is how big I am. I'll never be big enough to be a good 125 pounder. And it was all just a victimhood mentality that really, I found out later on, because I found a lot of success at 125s in the college area of wrestling when I got a little more mature in my thinking, and I got out of the program I was in and into another program. But that type of mentality, that victimhood mentality, all it does is it just makes you drift. You just become a drifter. This was probably one of the things, this next quote was one of the things that stuck out the most to the book, in the book, to me. Prayer is not a pious decoration of life. Pious is a holy oh, look at me. Like, prayer is not a decoration. Prayer is not something to just like, oh, I'm going to do this because it's going to make me look good, it's going to make me feel good, all the above. So the quote is, prayer is not a pious decoration of life, but is the breath of human existence. Regardless of if you believe in the same God I'm talking about, whatever God you believe in. You believe in no God. You want to talk about meditation. You want to talk about talking to our Creator, and if that Creator is nature, like whatever you believe. Me personally, I do believe there's a God, and that prayer is really the breath that should be the breath of life. And I don't nearly pray as much, especially someone who does Christian music all the time and tells people about Christ. Like, I should definitely be praying way more. And it was kind of like a reality check for me. It's perfect for the book, like The Wounded Healer. Here's a guy who's, man, I don't spend enough time praying. And it really becomes a reflection, right? When we pray, we are focused on, well, two things. One, we're visualizing what we're talking about, right? So if I'm praying for my week to go smoothly, I'm visualizing my week. If I'm praying for, let me see opportunities to help people, I'm visualizing, seeing opportunities for me to help people. I know this as an athlete. When you visualize something, when you visualize the match in front of you, the match starts to come out in front of you and fold out in front of you. Conor McGregor's a guy who does this a lot. He talks about visualizing and putting it into the universe, and the universe responds. And I don't think it's so much the universe responding, but I think you visualize it so much that when that thing that you were visualizing happens, you pounce. You just jump on it. One of the ones that really stands out is when he knocked out Aldo. He said, I feel him extending, and I come across with a left, and I catch him. I can feel it. He had visualized it so much in his head that would have happened sometime during the match, because if any time during the match he would have extended himself a little bit, he would have caught a left, because that's what he had been visualizing before the fight. So that was a great quote. I'll say it one more time. Prayer is not the purpose, or prayer is not the pious direct decoration of life, but is the breath of human existence. Next quote that I picked up from the book is, if there is nothing out there or up there, perhaps there is something in there. And this is talking about, I just mentioned, as far as like drifting through life and not saying there's a God, I'm not saying there's not a God, and all the above. Like, if there's nothing out there, there's nothing up there, like, people literally start looking inward. That's where we get, in my personal belief, that's where we get all these different explorations of self, right? It's just searching for an answer or a purpose because I don't understand the existence that I'm in right now. And I think we have all been there. Part of the problem with some ministry that I have is it's said from a place of, you're wrong for being there. You're wrong for being in a place where you feel like you want to take your own life. Well, hold on. I feel like a lot of people have been in that place where they've been that depressed and down and have come through that. I'm one of those people who've been in a spot where I didn't want to be here and have come through that. So I'm not going to tell someone else that they're incorrect for being there. But what I am going to do is try to help them through that very difficult and very tough time. I thought that was pretty awesome. Next quote that I have, only he who is able to articulate his own experience can offer himself to others as a source of, I misspelled that. What am I trying to say here? Clarification. Sorry. My fingers were not typing the right ones. So let me, clarification. Let me read it one more time. Only he who is able to articulate his own experience can offer himself to others as a source of clarification. So if someone is going through something very difficult, like considering taking their own life, I can't help them through that if I'm not honest with myself and open with them and letting them know, like, hey, I've already been through that, right? So if I can't articulate my own experience to someone, how can I then offer my services? It's very hard. I had a couple friends who were doing marriage counseling, and they were getting marriage counseling from a single 22-year-old. And my advice to them was like, dude, you can't get marriage advice from someone who's never been married. They've read all the books, yeah, they have all these little tools, but that's no way to get advice. That's like taking, let's be honest, it's like taking real estate advice from me. I've read a bunch of real estate books, and I feel like I got a pretty good handle on how to do some real estate investment, and I'm really excited for myself when I get the funds to make my first payment on a house and start playing the game. Like, I'm pumped, and I'm extremely confident that I know what I'm doing. However, don't take advice from me because I haven't done it yet. So I think that's one of the failures of the church today is we got some people who have never had a drink of alcohol telling people that they shouldn't drink alcohol. Yeah, okay, I get it, but I need someone who's been through it to relate to, because I'm gonna be honest, you can't really help me right now. Yeah, I think that was pretty prolific part of this book. It is not. Oh, this is great. It is not the task of the Christian leader to go around nervously trying to redeem people or save them at the last minute. We do this a lot too in the church. Of, oh, well, I just got to get you saved. Just got to get you saved, right? I just got to get you saved, and it ticks people off. You're like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. So you want me to say this prayer, right? You want to get me saved, and then you're just never going to talk to me again. And that's really what we do with a lot of people. We're not there for the long haul. One of my favorite authors, Kyle Idleman, in his book, it's either Not a Fan or The End of Me. I think it's Not a Fan. He talks about investing. If you're not willing to invest time into someone, you have no business speaking into their life. If you walk by somebody and you say, hey man, you really need to stop smoking cigarettes. Okay, cool. You gonna help me do it? Well, I don't have time to do that. Well, then you got no business speaking into my life. If you're not gonna invest in me, then don't speak into my life. We do this as a church big time. I'll see somebody on TV and say, hey, this person needs to do this, or they need to stop doing that in their life. Well, cool, are you going to go be a friend to them and help them stop doing that? No. Then you need to shut up. Yeah, sorry. So I thought that was pretty awesome. And then this next quote is great, and it's part of the reason why that first statement that I just made, not the first statement, the statement that I just made, that's why it makes a lot of sense. Behind the dirty curtain of our painful symptoms, there is something great to be seen. Behind every wound, behind every hurt that we have, there is a amazing beauty of humanity. And that's really what, I really feel like a lot of what Christ is and what Christ was trying to show us was human nature and humanity, right? Compassion, love, grace, a reflection of ourself. If I've ever stole something, I can understand someone who steals. If I've ever hated someone, I can understand someone who hates. If I've ever lusted after someone, I can understand someone lusting. This goes back to Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius. And as far as if I take away the harm, if I take away the statement, I have been harmed, if I take that away out of my vocabulary, then the harm goes away as well. And so I'll end it with this. It was a story, one of the final stories they told in the book was about a man who was not on his deathbed. He was going in to have minor surgery, and the surgery was going to fix his legs. He was going to have some tubes put in, and he had requested a priest to come talk to him before the surgery because there was a decent chance that he would die. It wasn't very high, but it was still a chance. So they offered him a priest. He said, I'd love to talk to a priest. And the priest This is a true story. So the priest talked to him a little bit. They did a little back and forth, and the guy was like, well, I mean, I don't want to die, but I need my legs, and there's no one really waiting for me after this, and you know, if I die now, I guess I'll be one of those. It's a lost cause if I die now, right? Like as far as like saved, unsaved, like this different perspective. And if you guys saw my book review on Red Letter Revolution, you'll understand why I went saved, unsaved. Go check that review. That one's on my YouTube page. And the priest goes back and he goes back to his counselor, and he's like, this guy is just a stubborn old man. He didn't really open up to me at all, and yada yada. And part of what they do is they go over their notes over and over and over for a couple weeks, especially when someone passes. The guy ended up passing away, and it didn't really stick out to him until he went over his notes like 7 or 8 times, and then he realized that the statement, if this is the end for me, then I guess I'm one who's lost. Right? That statement says a lot about where he's at and how he's feeling and how what his perspective is before he goes into this major surgery. And it talks about a man being in limbo. He said there was nothing waiting for him here. Right? So he didn't want to be here. Nothing but hard labor. He was a tobacco farmer. Nothing but hard labor for him waiting here. But he didn't want to die. So you're talking about a man who's in limbo. He doesn't want to be here, but he doesn't want to die. He's nowhere. This is exactly what we're talking about. There's no purpose. There's no reason. There's no rhyme. It's just like I'm floating. I'm drifting from thing to thing to thing, right? And it talks about the human condition and being in a surgery. And doctors they can't prove this, but there's a lot of research being done on people's attitudes and how we feel has been shown to reflect good health and good recovery. If we're in a good mood, if we're in a good spirit, we tend to be able to, with cancer survivors, a lot of times it's their attitude that really makes the difference in their survival, right? They don't get butthurt about it. They're just like, nah, I'm just gonna good attitude about this. I still love my family. I got this. I'm gonna go through. This guy went into surgery, and when his body had to make a decision to fight for life, it couldn't make a decision. So the decision ended up being to die. And clearly, it wasn't his body making the decision, but I'm making the argument that our job as people who are conveying the message of Christ is not necessarily to save that man's soul, but to invest and to be part of people's lives who don't have anybody, to look in the mirror and reflect and show them humanity back. The author of the book stated that all the minister should have done, even if the guy was very closed about talking about faith, was saying, I will be here waiting for you regardless. I'll be waiting for you regardless, whether it's here when you get out of surgery or whether it's on the other side of existence. I will be waiting for you. If no one else waits for you, I'm in. That statement alone speaks to how we should look at humanity as a whole and how we should understand and empathize with people's positions. So all in all, this book was a pretty good book. Little short. Probably could have dove in a little deeper. I would have loved to hear some more stories. Maybe some instances or examples of ministers who do a good job of this. But this particular author tends to do short pieces of work. So I don't want to knock him for that. I'll say it's a 4. I'll say it's a 4.5. Because there were nuggets in here, but you did have to dig for them a little bit. This is a book that took a lot of personal reflection to get stuff out of it. As I was listening to, you can't just listen to it. It's not like a sales book where it's just going to give you facts, or a real estate book where it's just going to give you tools. Most spiritual books are self-reflection books, and this was no different. So next week I'm going to be reading Tribe by Sebastian Jr. And coming up next week, this is what I have next week on my docket. Tomorrow I have a commercial in San Francisco that I'm doing behind the scenes stuff for. I'm playing at Vinewood Youth Group on Tuesday in Lodi, and that is part of the tour. That's one of our last tour dates. We have a commercial Wednesday, I believe, in Modesto. I'm actually going to be in that one. I think it's a medical service company that actually staffs all the prisons with medical people. I get to be a prisoner. I look like a prisoner, apparently, so I get to be a prisoner. So that's always awesome when I get to be in front of a camera, even if it's just a little tiny part like that. Thursday, I'm doing voiceover work for that museum project that I told you about. Again, if you guys want to find out how to actually get involved with that, as far as like making a donation to make some of these pilot programs for Mickey's Grove be greenlit by the schools, I'd love to tell you more about that and what we're doing. And then we are playing at The Well in Stockton, and that's a youth group, and there's like 4 or 5 different churches that have been kind of notified that we're going to play there, and that's part of the tour as well. This Saturday, I'm going to be honest, I didn't even look at this Saturday to see what was up. It's blank right now, and it looks like I'm probably going to be hanging out. That's what it is. I'm hanging out with my nephew this Saturday, so that's going to be pretty dope. Final thoughts, guys. This is from Grant Cardone, and I keep drilling this into my head. No one's coming to your house to make your dreams come true. It ain't going to happen here. It ain't going to happen here watching my videos. I hope you guys enjoy these when you watch them. And this is something I get to watch a couple years down the road and kind of see my growth. I've told you guys before that these are more for me. And getting regurgitating the information that I've read over the week really helps me retain it as well. So no one is coming to your house to make your dreams come true. Get off your butts, go get it. That's from Grant Cardone. Follow me on Instagram and then Twitter as well. You guys know that I always put my notes from the book that I'm reading. That's pretty much the only things that I tweet out. So you guys can find me at Sam Fragoza at both those places. And these will be up on YouTube as well, on the Dispersing the Cloud YouTube page. I'll talk to you guys soon.